Start recording. This is Lansing Online News Radio. You're listening to LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7, here in Lansing, Michigan. This is Bonnie Buckaroo, and joined immediately by my co-host Bill Castanier, and both of us are windblown tonight.
Good evening. That was a little short-haired German shepherd blowing across the street, I think.
It was a Cocker Spaniel.
Well, there's a lot of them go. I saw a cat that was having real trouble making it across.
What's going on?
I hope it's warm weather behind it.
No, it's going back down to the 50s after tomorrow. And then we're going to see some freezing temps over the week. I do what I call sort of living room harvesting now. I have all my plants that were slated to go to the hoop house, and every week I persuade myself, well, I'll just wait a few more days because it'll be nice. And I've now waited to the point that I'm now harvesting romaine. The kale is starting to look real good. I went to that mushroom workshop. I ate shiitake mushrooms for breakfast because the shiitakes are already in. Isn't that amazing?
How fast?
Well, these are the ones on the compost block.
Right.
So and they are already harvested.
2 to 3 weeks?
3 weeks, and they're huge and they're wonderful. Oh my goodness, I feel like I've just,
That is going to be one, I hate to say this, but a growth industry maybe. Mushrooms, prepackaged mushroom kits.
Oh, I was fascinated.
Myers will be selling them.
I'm hoping the man that whose workshop I attended, who owns Growing Easy, will be willing to come here, Chris Wright. He's just amazing, and he has all of this lore about mushrooms, the wonderful things that they do, and how they're going to really save the earth in all sorts of ways. And mycology is just an amazing thing. He's been stolen away by the University of Michigan, and he's going to be working at the Dearborn facility, which is called the Environmental Innovation Laboratory, I believe it's called, where they're going to open up a mycology section looking at all the things that you can do with mushrooms. Just amazing.
Well, I'm fascinated. You had mushrooms that fast.
I know. I was stunned. And they're good. So, I'm just sort of eating out of the living room now. I'm eating in the living room and eating out of the living room. So,
it's the new world of eating, I guess.
It's the new world of eating. Yeah. But I did post on Lansing Online News over the weekend my favorite new recipe, which is making your own coconut bacon.
I saw it. I didn't really catch the concept, frankly.
You didn't? Yeah. For vegetarians, this is a big deal.
Well,
Everybody talks about bacon like it's the end-all be-all in gourmet circles. And we are looking for substitutes for things like, the bacon tomato lettuce sandwich.
Absolutely.
And what this does is you get broad flake coconut, and you put, and the magic ingredients are the Bragg's Aminos spray that you got. That you're looking kind of weird at that too. Yeah, that's a soybeans.
See, the whole thing just didn't. I read it. I thought it was. At first, I thought it was one of your jokes.
No,
I really did. Come on.
But then you saw the pictures.
Yep, I did. I thought it was a joke. But.
No, and then you use maple syrup, and you use liquid smoke and water, and you mix it all up, and you bake it. And it's cool.
But is it good for you? Probably. Right. Of course, how could it be worse than bacon?
Right. I was going to say,
what are you talking? Yeah, bacon.
Plus, you don't have to torture a pig.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not all bad.
The people that work at Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, which are really they have a bacon camp.
Yes, they do.
It costs like $400 to go to. But they call bacon the gateway
drug to the rest of the pork products.
Yep.
Yeah. If you watch enough of the cooking channel,
that's pretty common.
Yeah, that's all they care about. Yeah.
But bacon is, the hipsters have driven the price up dramatically because they use it for everything now. You have hamburgers in it, chicken, steak.
And it's all really bad for you. It's really bad for you.
It can't be good for you.
No. But it's
good tasting.
Turns out that by posting that recipe, it upped my clout score, right? KLOUT, where you'd see how much impact you have on the web. And I got one of my first freebie perks. Some spice company is going to send me Beaumont spice now because I am an influencer in food circles. Hey. See, wouldn't that be nice?
Where did you find this recipe?
Huh?
Where was this recipe from? Who?
There were 2 or 3 people who had variations, and I tried it myself and altered a few things. So it's an alteration between 2 online sources. So, because I reduced the temperature a little so it baked a little longer.
It was pretty odd. Like I said, at first I thought it was a joke. I really did, because I thought this cannot be real. Using coconut.
I posted the ultimate in the other day, which is that there is this sort of oddity going on in China, where people are taking pictures of their dog dressed in pantyhose and high heels.
I was sick.
It
It
was
was
sick.
sick. It was
It is
really
definitely
sick.
sick. I have no doubt we will overtake the Chinese. We don't have to worry about them. Any culture that has decided to spend most of their Instagram time posting pictures of their dogs in pantyhose, I figure that's not a culture that we have to worry about.
Of course, I told you I watched a video of a hairless rat going up the stairs that a friend of mine took the other day, which was pretty weird.
Facebook has completely changed our lives. We
Yeah.
used to watch or talk about sort of weighty issues, and now we're just busy looking at pictures of hairless rats. And we discussed, we now have mutual friends who own hedgehogs.
Hedgehogs. I
Yeah,
mean, think of the coincidence of that in this city.
right, right.
Well, for a while, I thought we might be talking that maybe it was her boyfriend or something because I
Oh,
said, how many people can have hedgehogs?
but they're getting popular. Next up is sugar gliders. So yes, you have to go on YouTube if you look up all of these little. We'd all really love to have is the slow loris. Have you seen the slow loris? There's a wonderful video out
It's
of
like an
Russia of this.
anteater or something.
It kind of looks like one, and they tickle its little belly and its little arms go up, and that's a big deal. I mean, that's got what I don't know, 3, 4 million hits on it, something like that. I found out that YouTube pays roughly. YouTube won't tell you what they're really paying you for videos that you monetize. But the formula really that most people have centered in on is 5 cents per thousand views. So I ran into a video the other day of a golden retriever that talks about maple bacon. We've already been on this bacon kick, right? 143 million views. 143 million. But all that makes you is $6,700. So you're not going to quite be able to retire on your cute animal video, I guess. Hmm.
Wow.
That was my retirement plan.
You'll have to do 100,000 cute animal
I know,
videos
that's the problem. You're going to have to come up with a
Eating-
viral video every week.
eating coconut bacon.
Coconut bacon. A couple other things we should talk about. You and I crossed paths yesterday when you were down there at the Michigan Antiquarian Book and Paper Show.
Right.
And I was down there shooting video of the Shudokan conference, which was fantastic.
It was an amazing event.
Thousands of kids
That's just everywhere.
in amazing costumes. I've never seen so many Sailor Moon clones in my life. Elves and women who are princesses and
Lots of people with tails.
yes, yes,
There were some extremely well done costumes too.
beautiful stuff.
The Shudokan was allowed to come to the antiquarian book sale either for a reduced rate or free.
Free.
So they were walking all the way through it. It was a lot of fun.
You'd look around and there'd all of a sudden be a princess over there looking at some
looking at some
postcards.
books. Yeah, it was really cute.
It's the first time in a long time though I've seen a princess always on a cell phone. They all had their cell phones glued to their ears, but they were all in these exotic costumes. It was so much fun, and they were having a great time. It's got to be good for the city to have that kind of a large
They
conference.
caused no trouble
No,
at all.
no. Although I did ask the guy who had built his own. It took him 2.5 months to make his own metal helmet. Because he's one of those. I asked him if there was a Second Amendment right to carry a sword. But I don't know. Is there a separate law for concealed swords? I mean, I don't know.
I saw somebody that had quite a interesting sword. That's what I was looking at. I
Yeah.
thought, whoa.
Yeah. And I saw Hunter S. Thompson there.
Yeah, see, I missed it.
This was so fun because you can dress up as anybody you want to. And I was impressed to see that it was a diverse crowd, different races. It was all older. There were some older people there. There were parents with kids,
Yep,
and I saw.
I saw parents with kids come through the book show.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very cool. I thought it was just a great event. Yeah, I was really
And the book
delighted.
show had one of the highest attendances it ever had. And regardless if the Shudokan younger people were there, there was a lot of younger people this time.
Were there
Now, the downside is they don't buy as many books or
Right.
spend as much on books.
Yeah.
But a lot of young people.
But at least it's a good sign for the future.
It was a very good sign. I was amazed. The average age went down to about 60 instead. When you take it all
Yeah,
into
right.
account, instead of 85 or whatever, all white male, because that's who book collectors generally are.
Is that right?
Yeah, it came way down. There's a lot of young women collecting books.
That's interesting.
That is totally different. It's totally different.
It's either put your money on that or Bitcoin. I've been hammering that Bitcoin thing hard. I've put the hidden code on various websites. I have signed up for a Bitcode miner. Even as we speak, it is at home on my other laptop, mining away for me, trying to get my hands on some Bitcoin. They've gone up to $186 a Bitcoin. It started out 2 years ago at zero. This is my plan for the future, Bill. I'm going to corner the Bitcoin market.
And now, wait a minute. We got bacon and Bitcoin.
Bacon and Bitcoin. Somebody just sold a Maserati the other day for like 300 Bitcoin.
Wow.
Yeah, because they figured that the Bitcoin would appreciate in value a lot more than the Maserati. So it's interesting stuff. Interesting times.
It's an odd world.
It is an odd world. One more announcement I want to make before I forget it. I met today with Bob Huntoon, who is he's the general manager of the Capital City Stealth, which is the minor league football team here in town. They're going to be holding a practice this Saturday. They're doing some of their practices now that the weather's good. They're outside. And they're going to be over at Elmwood School, Elmwood Elementary, over on Snow Road on Saturday afternoon. And I was totally unaware of this. I mean, I know that, I know about the Love Nuts. I'm not a big sports person, but there's this whole minor league football thing that goes on during the summer.
All over the country.
Yeah.
I've known a couple of writers that have done the Plimpton sort of thing where they've played with them. They tend to be either very good high school players that didn't go to college, or college players that went to smaller colleges and want to just continue playing.
Yeah.
Very seldom does anyone ever make it out of it there.
Oh, it's not a farm team system the
No,
way
they
it
just
is.
no, they're just doing it because they like to play football.
Yeah. But for
Because they
people,
pay their own way,
they do.
pay everything.
It's pay to play for the players. It's it's a sort of quasi-pro, semi-pro, quasi-fantasy league kind of thing. I gather from the way that it works. But I'm thinking for all those football junkies who feel deprived during the warmer months, that's a good
Yeah.
alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good idea, and I don't. Where do they play their games?
Well, they just signed a contract with Waverly
Okay.
School, so they'll be able to do that. That was part of their difficulty. They had been planning last year, this is their fourth year, on playing at Sexton, but just after they had gotten ready to ink their contract, Sexton did get its money to be able to do a rehabilitation of the stadium, so they had to cancel out of the contract. That put them out in Charlotte last year, which is sort of, too far out of the way for a lot of people. So this year they're going to come back into the area and be there at Waverly. I'm hoping to be there for the next couple of years. So some cool stuff going on.
That actually will be kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things I wanted, before I forget, the Greater Lansing Historical Society is going to launch an exhibit called Lansing Eats in June.
Oh, in June?
It's really about the history of eating in Lansing, which goes back to the first settlers here, which would have been hunting and fishing generally, but it's going to come up to the modern era and all the restaurants and the butchers and the bakers that are mostly not here anymore.
Right.
And one of the things that we're looking for are menus from those restaurants.
Menus.
They're a little tougher to find than we thought they would be.
Really?
Yeah, I thought there'd be in every young woman's scrapbook somewhere, but they don't appear to be. So if anyone is listening and has got menus from Lansing area restaurants, we'd certainly entertain borrowing them and on loan and giving them back to them at the end of it.
My first husband's friend, Larry Pontius, drove his girlfriend from Jackson, Michigan up here to propose to her at Tarpoff's.
Oh, I just got a postcard from Archie Tarpoff.
Did you really?
And it makes you sad they tore it down.
It does. There were so many stories
It was
associated.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, I had forgotten how gorgeous it was. I mean, I ate there several times when I was in college and probably after that a few times. But it was two basic, looked like two tutors back to back.
Yeah.
And it was right on the corner of Grand and Kalamazoo. And it was torn down for the bus depot.
Oh. Not a step up.
No, and then there's Jim's Tiffany, which was torn down for a surface parking lot.
Well, he did it up right. He got a private dining room, and he worked it out with the waiter that when she sat down and they ordered dinner, they wheeled in a cart with a silver, little plate with a top on it, and then when they pulled the plate to show it to her, it was a rose with a diamond ring in the middle of the rose. Now that's romantic.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So you can't say no then. You might break it off later, but you take the ring, you say yes, and you go from there, right? Yeah.
Well, they went to a beautiful place. We had a lot of elegant restaurants in downtown.
We did, but that was in an era when, I was stunned to realize that Detroit was once the most affluent city in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the auto industry, and those days are certainly, we can't support those kinds of restaurants much, can we?
No.
No. It's kind of sad. You're listening to WLNZ LCC Radio 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We may want to bring in, all right, if we don't mind here, Eric Schertzing is our first guest. He's our Ingham County Treasurer and head of the Ingham County Land Bank, and we're going to bring him up to the microphone and talk about a few economic issues here. The good news is, Eric, I guess they're going to put some brick on the front of the Neogen, right?
It looks like it. folks have been agitating on that one for a while. So,
Including Bill, who was
jeez,
horrified at the way the thing went. Does that mean they have to pay more in taxes? That would be a good, nice trick, wouldn't it?
I would think that the taxable value on a brick structure is a little bit more than a metal sheathed one.
Cool.
But
We
they're
get more
getting,
money out of
but
it.
they're getting a loan to do it too. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
but the fix is important, and hopefully it's going to be a good lesson that no one in their right mind will do it again.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen some of that happen. Somebody, my sister, a neighbor, put in a very large pole barn for a garage that took up almost the whole lot, that kind of thing. And those really are kind of ugly.
And Lansing, if you're a private homeowner, you can only use a certain percentage of the land. I mean, to build on. After that, you can't do it. You're out of code.
Well, if you're out of code, do they just come in and tear it down, or do they fine you, or what do they do to you?
They have made people tear things down.
Wow.
It depends on the community and how severe the infraction. It's a shame that there has to be an ordinance correction. Of course, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. The lesson is really for the business community, I think, to reflect on why would you do that? No, no, I
Really,
mean,
seriously, no, that's a good question.
to me,
Right, yeah.
it is not a regulatory issue. I mean,
Right,
I'm
right.
not that hell bent on government regulation. It's really for business to reflect and think about now, what were the series of steps? I mean, this should be a college level
Yeah.
mini case study. And what were the series of steps that we went through that had us do that to a neighborhood that we worked in and that we had invested in?
Right, that we would like to see it do well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
Kind of
So
frustrating.
it was somebody made a very bad mistake, and I think you're right, Eric. There was a series of mistakes that somebody should have raised their hand, including the
yeah.
city, including the Economic Development Agency. But everything went wrong apparently,
Yeah.
including just bad taste.
Well, there's that. There's that. I mean, one person. I mean, I remember the years ago being stunned to realize it was the first time as a kid that I realized somebody had wanted to paint their home in Olmsted, Ohio, outside of Cleveland, beet red, and discovered, that's when I learned about how zoning meant that in that homeowners association in that subdivision, you weren't going to be allowed to do it beet red, and I was big into freedom. Of course, if you lived next door and you were trying to sell your home, you wouldn't necessarily be that thrilled about beet red. But those are the kinds of things that makes life kind of tough for the people who have to keep
Public
our.
officials.
Yeah. Hmm. I wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
I have often been dumb about many things. One of the things I'm kind of really still dumb about, to a very large degree, is assessments.
Sure.
Could you give me a brief? One of the things that I was just reading a guy the other day who said, don't buy a home because you never know when you could get hit with all sorts of unexpected assessments for various things. And every once in a while I get a little bill, and I believe it's from the county. They clean a drain or two, an
Drain
agricultural
commissioner's office, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is always a surprise. It's not too much, so it doesn't worry me much. But what are assessments? How do they work? What level? Can any municipality issue new assessments? We're talking about it for street lighting and sidewalks in Lansing. Can they, county, what do they assess people for?
Well, the county, mainly through the drain commissioner's office, has special assessment authorities under the drain code. Those can get quite big. I remember when I worked for Pat Lindeman as chief deputy drain commissioner in the Groesbeck neighborhood, some of those commercial developed assessments per acre, I think they got into the $50,000 neighborhood. Now, these were on an acre, you can have 5 to 8 houses. I mean, so when you divide that up over the number of structures and the value of the structures, it isn't that big a percentage. But that's in a township. In a city, you really have more controls in place over any large assessments because the area is developed. There's stormwater and all of those things already in place. Um, but that doesn't stop people from getting very animated over a $40 or $50 assessment going on their water bill to take care of the lights. But I think if they put it in context, they'd think, well, $50 to have a operating street light or whatever in my neighborhood, a hydrant in my neighborhood is not very much money.
Bill, who may be impacted, has that look on his face like, I don't know.
I didn't like the way it was done.
Well,
That's, I mean, I understand we have to pay for it. It's basically moving it from a city cost back on the neighborhood cost. Um, we are paying for it anyway. I mean, so
Don't you think
it's
the
a
really
switch.
don't you think the really amazing
But
thing though is that nobody thought about that in the last 5 or 10
yeah,
years as the budget was really getting tighter?
I
Ah.
think there's a lot of things. Like
Oh,
I just
obviously.
noticed we increased the mayor's salary, which see now those are the kind of things that bother me.
Are they?
I'm going to pay 46. I'll probably pay more than 46. We got to double a lot. So we'll probably say 100. But okay, what pain did you feel,
Yeah.
Mayor? Because those add up. Those all add up. I have we have a condo in Ann Arbor that someone lives in who's close to us. But anyway, taxes in everybody says that Ann Arbor is a very expensive place. It's the same assessment. We pay less taxes in Ann Arbor, and there's a
Really?
reason because we don't have an airport. We
Oh,
have a lot of costs living in the city, by the way. It's kind of
interesting.
surprising.
Well, the airport is countywide, but
But I know,
yeah.
but Ann Arbor doesn't have one. So they
Right.
don't
Oh, that does make a
pay a
difference. Yeah, I never
airport
thought
tax.
about
There's all
that.
kinds of little school assessments that we have that they don't have.
Interesting.
It's sort of odd.
As expensive as Ann Arbor is, that would surprise me. That's
They're
really
very
neat.
conservative on taxing.
Interesting. Well, they got a lot of fairly affluent people to tax
Conservative
too, so.
and conservative people, and their property values are higher. But they're having trouble with their schools too. But I've always been surprised. Because you can kind of compare them because they're the same. They're within $100. And
Very
you go
interesting.
through and look, and you go, well, here's why ours are more, and we have these that you don't have in Ann Arbor.
Huh.
So there's sort of a misconception a little bit about what it costs to live in different cities, I think.
Well, see, I live out in the country, and I live close to the Jackson National Life sort of strangeness, which is that it is part of
Mm.
Lansing, only it's located out where I live, which is sort of on the Okemos Mason border. And there was talk among my neighbors that one of their concerns was that once that went in, that we might well end up with sewer and water assessments as those go in. And I gather those can also get expensive if you're living in a rural area.
If you're in the service boundary for the water and sewer, I think they specifically set that up though to make sure that you weren't,
That's what happened, yes.
eligible
Yeah.
or liable for
Yeah.
that. We didn't really get into the assessment overall fact for
Okay.
your property. I mean that's based on surrounding properties. It's they do a calculation based on replacement cost is one way to look at it. What
Hmm.
are surrounding properties worth? Things like how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, the size of the garage, the square footage, is the basement finished off, and all of those different variables go in. And then, of course, in Michigan with Proposal A that came along in 1994, that caps property. So if
Right.
you've been in a property since 1994 and somebody else comes along and bought in 2004, your taxes can be quite different on the same identical property
Yeah.
next door to each other.
Yeah. That's what's so surprising. That cap made a difference.
And there's no full disclosure yet on that, is there?
Well, I remember the Citizens Research Council, this was years back, they had a summary document of the tax code in Michigan. It was 70 pages. This is a summary document. So,
That
so
was the
how,
summary.
that was the summary document. So how can you really expect? I mean, I certainly
Well,
try to understand as treasurer.
here's my case. When somebody sells a house, I think of real estate agents. Someone needs to tell the person buying it that those taxes are going to change. And they
Well,
don't.
certainly not to the advantage of the.
No, and they don't
Well,
do
of course,
it.
in the down market, that hasn't been nearly as important.
No.
Right.
But you're right. When a friend of my son bought a house in Ann Arbor, he was from California.
Oh,
He looked at the taxes. He thought, wow, this is a pretty good deal.
yeah.
Guess what?
Oh.
Wrong taxes.
Yeah.
And no one told him. He said, how would I have known it?
Right.
You wouldn't. A 23, 24-year-old, they wouldn't know.
Yeah, that's one of the things that
And
always worried me about becoming a homeowner. I was reading this blogger today. His name is James Altucher, and he's quite good. And he's encouraging people. I thought I'd give the link to my students till he told them, don't get a college degree and don't buy a home. So I thought that might not be such a wise thing to have them read.
here, Mom, read this.
But that's what, it's those kinds of hidden costs or things that surprise you, and you try to minimize those when you become a homeowner. So
Well, life has lots of surprises.
it does. This came up today because Bill and I were talking. I had a very good friend who, his father lived in, I believe it was North Carolina, and my friend lived here, and it was in constant contact with his dad, but he visited them every 3 months or so, that kind of thing. Couldn't get down there that often, and all of a sudden one day he went to get in touch with his dad, and his dad wasn't there anymore. And it was almost 3 months later that they found his dad a state away in a homeless shelter. They didn't realize that his father was having memory lapses.
Mm.
And he had deteriorated to the point that he wandered off and nobody knew who he was and he didn't have ID on him. And he apparently just sort of, I mean, who knows what happened to him during that intervening time. And my friend said that, just figuring out his finances and all of those things was a nightmare. I mean, he owned a condo. What would happen if the tax bill came in? What kind of other fees and things did he owe?
Mhm.
And you must run into those situations where, I mean, the new stats say 1 out of every 3 of us is now going to have dementia. What happens if you send a tax bill to somebody and they don't know?
Last Monday I foreclosed on 234 properties, and each one of them has their own unique story.
Oh, that's it.
There's a nice brick home on the Grand River over in Lansing Township that Deutsche Bank didn't pay the taxes on. I'm sure we'll hear from them. There's individuals that we have gone out of our way, as we do, of course, to have a clear conscience,
Yeah.
to notify. You do all sorts of searches. But there's always some properties that we never hear from anybody on.
Isn't that odd?
Well, I guess I see it enough years that it's not quite odd to me anymore. It's unfortunate.
So a lot of people just walk away and just have no reason to be notified.
You never
about
know, I guess.
You don't know.
You just have no clue.
I foreclosed a couple years ago on Denver Street on a brand new house. It was a development company. I heard about them, a year later from somebody. But there was still the warranty information in the oven. I mean, this house had never been lived in, and it was worth 50 or 60,000. I mean, it wasn't anything palatial. But they just, I heard the guy was in California. He was a teacher, and the investments went south, and he moved.
Wow. So, in a case like that, that's just very baffling to me. I mean, I don't know. You'd think somebody in the family would know or follow up on something like that. You ever have people come screaming into the office because they realize their property is now gone and they just found out about it?
I've been getting a few calls this week.
Guys,
Yes.
Out of the
Yeah.
234?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. There's nothing they can do.
No.
No.
They're past all the deadlines.
There's not the deadline.
The statute matters. If one person could wiggle out of it, everybody could then wiggle out of it. What's the point of the law?
Yeah.
We do have another 100 people that have another 60 to 75 days. Those are people that we heard from that we're working with, and we deferred a couple hundred more for a whole year. So, we bend over backwards to work with folks, but ultimately, unfortunately, bad things happen to even good people.
Well, I got a letter from Eric the other day and opened it up, and it was asking for a dog license for my dead dog Schmoops.
Please
So-
call us and let us know.
I was
We
gonna
delete
say,
those, so
yeah.
we don't
There's
send
no,
them
there's
to
no
you.
death notices for dogs. You don't have to. So it's kind of hard to follow.
In my life, there should be. Matters a lot more than a lot of my relatives.
Well, yeah, it's like 83% of the American public with a pet considers that pet a member of the family. I mean, we make sure we understand that.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Now, Eric, you mentioned there was foreclosures on 230 some homes. Now, where does that stand in reference historical? I mean, where are we kind of at right now?
Each year is a little different, a little unique, some different things going on, but this year is an awful lot like last year, really. And unfortunately, the delinquent taxes that came over, the fresh ones that came over this year in the city of Lansing, the dollar amount was up a little bit. Taxes went down 7% in the city last year. So, I mean,
Really?
the turnover delinquent should go down, but it went up. And the number of parcels turned delinquent to the treasurer's office went up. So that is not what I was expecting.
Do you have any way to analyze what's causing it in a discrete way, I guess?
I think the people that are hurting continue to hurt. I mean, obviously employment has improved. The wealth effect has come back a little bit, but I don't think we're talking about a lot of stock owners.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are investors, but most of them are individuals. It's sad. It's the hardest part of the job, and certainly the hardest day when I do that foreclosure.
Gotta be tough.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that would be hard, but somebody has to do that job.
Yeah, you try to do it with as much compassion as you can.
I see that you are coming here with a brochure about Money Smart Week from April 20th to the 27th. a lot of activities. Why didn't you ask me to do a workshop on putting your money into shotgun shells and canned goods, which is my plan for the future?
You know, we can still add a session online. It won't be in the printed material.
And growing
but
mushrooms in your living room.
Yeah, how I'm harvesting all
well,
the
that
mushrooms.
could be a couple of financial incentives there, no doubt. You know, so Money Smart Week is really one of these preventive measures. You know, we don't want people to lose their home. We don't want them to pay too much for their car loan.
Ah,
Yeah, so I'm doing a couple classes if people are interested in learning about the land bank. We're doing that Monday night, the 22nd. Most of these are at the downtown library, so it's very convenient to the bus station and all those things. There's home ownership classes and financial empowerment, money mistakes you can't make on. I think it's on Wednesday night. I'm doing a tax foreclosure auction process Q&A. That's always very popular. July 24th and August 24th will be the tax auctions this year of a lot of those properties that I referenced.
but you're doing Money Smart for Kids on Thursday. Tell me about that one.
Well, you know, you try to reach all different age groups. They have some weekly groups that come to the library. I think actually my chief deputy is going to do that. We have a couple Berenstain Bear books, Trouble with
Oh,
Money, and another one, books that I loved reading to my kids
yeah.
when they were young, and we'll share that with them and some other money tips. We have bags of shredded money and
Oh,
you know
cool.
bookmarks that talk about some of the history of money.
The Life of Ben Bernanke.
Yeah, it's just you know just raising their awareness and hopefully help people help themselves.
I think that's one of
Biographies of Ayn Rand, which I sold one of those at the book sale.
at the
this
book sale
weekend.
yesterday. Was it a libertarian
It was
party member?
cheap.
It was cheap. Oh well, then I wouldn't be happy. She would want to see that go for a premium.
Right.
Supply and demand.
Yeah. Well, that is hard, though. It is hard for kids to grow up and know. I mean, I think that's one of the big failures. I was just telling Bill that it's difficult for some of my students to figure out. I've asked them to do a budget for various projects that they're inventing. They're inventing new media. And money is foreign territory to a lot of kids. Even when they're in college, they're still relatively sheltered from, and they got a lot to learn about things like assessments on homes.
Oh
and-
yeah, you know, I remember when I was 5 years old, we went to Stockbridge State Bank growing up on the farm, and I opened up my savings account. And
Ah.
when I was 17 years old, I paid cash for a new car.
Wow.
You know, I'd worked hard. I'd saved my money.
What'd you buy?
It was a Plymouth TC3, a little hatchback, $6,000.
Oh yeah, I remember that car.
Yeah, I
I
had
remember
that,
that car.
had that for a long time.
And all the
Um,
kids in Cyprus did that and risked having their little learning the lesson about how the banks can wipe it out.
And of course, with my own kids, you know, and this is something I would just encourage people to do. I took them to Mason State Bank, or
Did you?
no, I took them to Dart Bank, a little competition out there in Mason. And when they were 5 or 6, you know, we opened up savings accounts for all of them, and they pay attention to that. That's you've got to be familiar
Yeah.
with stuff.
I remember one time when I tried to do that with a kid and the banks weren't giving out savings accounts to children. And I thought, what a dumb idea that was to
Yeah.
stop doing that because that's one way kids get to learn and look at the bottom line.
Go every week to a bank.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, make them financial.
We used to get a dime allowance, and we were pretty young. We'd get a nickel we could spend on anything, which typically for me was a comic book. And then the nickel had to go in a box. We had several boxes that we saved money in. That was the way we learned how to save. And then when we got a certain amount, we'd take it to the bank.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember pop bottles for 2 cents.
Yeah.
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 Kids were scrappers,
Mhm.
generally speaking, I guess.
Well, fortunately, my parents ended up in financial difficulty once and dipped into my savings account when I was a kid, and it did say keep the family afloat when I was a kid. I mean, that can happen too. Times
It's
get
kind of like a
unexpected.
reverse mortgage, which, strangely enough, I was talking today about someone with that, and it's, why would someone want to do that? So I'm gonna let Eric answer that question. I
Ooh.
kind of gave a haphazard answer.
Well, you know, you need to go through financial counseling to do that. This is
Mhm.
going to be an older person with considerable equity in their home. But you know, somebody needs a sustainable
Cash.
life, and if they can get it out of their home, and they don't have other things to do with the home, if it isn't a sentimental value that somebody you know needs to inherit or wants to inherit, why not? If you have no attachments to that area, they get to live in the home until they pass on, and they can either do a lump sum, which is usually frowned upon, or you know equal monthly payments as long as they live. It's just like getting a Social Security check.
Or
It's just,
an annuity of some
So
sort.
it's discounted.
There is some discount for the
And that's
risk
how the
of the
bank makes
lender.
the money.
Yeah.
They do it through a discounting.
They do until you're Jean Calment, who lived in France, and she was one of the oldest living people in the history of the world. She lived to somewhere around 120 years old, and she did that in her 60s, and the poor guy she signed a private contract with was still paying her every month. He figured, long about 90, he figured he was in good shape, but he didn't realize he had another 30 years to go, so.
Well, he wasn't a spring chick then either
No,
anymore.
no, I think it was his son that finally got the place, so.
So, there aren't a lot of
There's not a lot of people that do
in a
that.
down market. It's a challenge, but
Yeah.
there is a counselor at the Center for Financial Health here just up the road that does do counseling for reverse mortgages.
Mhm.
That's kind of cool. Except I'm really tired of Henry Winkler and what is his name, Wayne Rogers from MASH, and it's all of these sort of my peer gummers. They all look a lot older than when I remember them in those TV series now. So it's a reminder. They're the ones doing the commercials on TV, trying to urge you to get that reverse mortgage. Bill wouldn't know because he doesn't watch TV.
No, I don't.
No.
No.
I don't ever see those.
Ah, see, well, I'm
I,
bombarded with them all
I
the time.
may make an exception tonight.
Ah, yes, indeed.
University of Michigan basketball.
We have to streak home at 9 o'clock. That's when the game starts. Are you a basketball fan?
Not so much. No, it really bothers me to see the tension of the competition. I just like to hear the score afterwards.
Oh,
It's a
interesting.
lot more fun to read it in the morning.
I always just like watching the game and don't care much which team.
I really don't either tonight. Sometimes I like good basketball.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. We want Michigan to win. It's good for Michigan.
Oh, I would hope
I'm
they
sure
do.
it is. The last time I was a real big fan was back in the 60s with Casey Russell and Oliver Darden and Bill Bunton and listening to it on the radio. My first husband was, he got ill the first year we were married and he never spent fewer than 4 months a year in the hospital. So we would sit there in the hospital together. That's in the old days when they kept you in the hospital a long time. If you were sick, they put you in the hospital. Didn't matter, they couldn't do anything for you. They just kept you there. So
Mhm.
we would listen to those basketball games and it was a cool era.
Those
Been a long time though.
Those are big time players,
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
and it cost Pete Gent from MSU that team any kind of really accolades.
Oh, that's
He,
right.
he was lost, and he was an incredibly great player. But he played again. He never became the player of the year in the
Ah.
Big Ten. He was never the scoring leader because U of N had 3 or 4 of the best players in the country.
I got to be friends with Pete Jen.
He was a cool guy.
guy.
He was
cool
a
guy.
very cool guy. He hurt himself very badly playing football, though.
Yeah, he did. He was the author of North Dallas 40.
Wow.
It was pretty much a life story. He went on, he was writing about PBB at the same time that I was, and we used to compare notes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And he moved out of Michigan because all of a sudden I went to get a hold of him. He was gone, and I said, Pete, what happened? He said, I planned on living here and bringing up my family here, but there was no way with my wife's breast milk, being pregnant, and PBB and the breast milk, we're out of here. So he left. So that's kind of sad. Yeah. Interesting man. Well, thank you very much, Eric, for
Thank you.
joining
You really
us.
helped us
Our
today.
monthly, we always have cool stuff to talk about. You've got a lot of good things going on in the community.
Try to
Thank
keep
you.
her going.
Thank you very much.
Thank-
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're going to be joined by Peter Morris, who we always try to lure here every April. Bill is very successful in getting Peter to come join us and talk to us about what's going on with baseball. Not that I know much, but I'm always interested in what Peter tells me. So what's going on with baseball these days?
Well, it's spring. It's the start of a new season, so every team thinks that they're still in contention, and that's exciting in itself. And all the other sports are kind of winding down for the year, or already over. So baseball gives us kind of a fresh start at this time of year.
It's the only time my husband ever expresses any interest in sports. He just loves baseball, could care less. I watched him in a triple overtime basketball game walk out of the room, didn't care. But for baseball, he's there. They have a very loyal fan base, don't they?
It is, and I think it's really part of the American experience.
Uh-huh.
And so, I think we've talked about before. I think baseball really has this really unique role in American history, where you really feel that it's connected to the American experience, and that it's a sport for all of us in a way that other sports take it or leave it. But baseball sort of speaks to us, I think, in a different way.
Well, right now there's a movie that I think a lot of people are going to catch. It's about Jackie Robinson. It's called Jackie Robinson, and Tell us a little bit why Jackie Robinson was so special, because there might be people out there listening that do not know.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah, I think the movie's actually called 42.
Oh, that's right, it's
And
42. Yep, that's his
and
number. Of
which was
course.
his number, and it's retired all across baseball, and
All across baseball?
all across every team has retired, and they're about 10 years ago they said it was retired for every player except that they grandfathered it, so anybody who was currently wearing it could still wear it. So there's one player who's still wearing it, and he's announced his retirement. He's probably the greatest reliever of all time, Mariano Rivera, and he's announced his retirement. So this will be the last year that it's worn by any player on the field. So 42 was Jackie Robinson's number. But Jackie Robinson broke the baseball color barrier in 1947. And tremendous courage to do that, tremendous courage on behalf of all the people who stood up for him to make it possible. And I think it does say a lot about baseball that mattered, that people know that about baseball's history, whereas people really don't know the same history with football and basketball
It's true,
and
isn't it?
hockey, and nobody can tell you who
No.
Who was the first player? It doesn't
Right.
stick in the memory. He and
Right.
Hank Aaron
Right.
are the two biggies.
Now, who wasn't a player? Was it Larry Doby?
Mhm.
Was
Larry
it?
Doby was the first American League player.
Yeah,
Ah.
they played in the American League, right?
Yeah, and just a few months after Jackie.
Was it?
But
Jackie
it was-
Robinson's widow was at the White House last week, is that right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's shocking to think she's still alive. I think of that as such past history. It's, but that's in our lifetime, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
our lifetime. I mean, he died very young, so it's
Ah.
it's certainly. I mean, she's been widow for 40 years now, but
Wow.
he died very young, and I think the whole experience took a lot out of him. You never want to say that somebody died for a particular reason, but I think that was an incredibly hard thing to just really hold that in, because one of the deals that he made with Branch Rickey, the Dodger president who signed him, was that for the first, I believe it was first 2 years, he would just he would take whatever, he was not going to fight back no matter what happened, and to hold that in, and that was not his nature. He was not a timid man. He was not he was somebody who was going to confront things. I mean, when he was in the army, he had gotten court-martialed because he refused to sit at the back of a bus.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
No, see,
so
that's a
he
story
was,
about him I didn't
yeah,
know.
no, and it was not at all his nature to to fail to confront indignities, and but he agreed, he understood that if he did that in the situation that he was in, that it was going to ruin it for everyone, and so he spent 2 years basically doing whatever he was told, turning the other cheek, and that was not his nature. So that took
Good
particular
grief.
courage, and and you got to wonder what that did for him internally,
Ate him
holding
up,
that
I
in,
would suspect.
holding that in for
I
2 years.
remember reading an article many years ago and it included excerpts of some of the hate mail he had received, and it was absolutely staggering. I mean, it was just frightening to realize the virulence that was under the surface. He must have known that every time he went out on the field. Had to worry. I mean, in this era, I'm not sure that would be be very dangerous.
Oh, I think so. One of the things that happens every year in baseball, there's some rule changes.
Mhm.
What are some of the? I know you keep track of some of those things.
Oh.
Those little arcane
Changes all the
rules.
stats.
What's going on?
Yeah, baseball, and people care about these little changes in a way that they don't. I mean, again, in football they change the rules far more dramatically than baseball. They'll make huge changes to the rules in football, and people just go, "Yeah, that's football. They do that." Baseball, people get. I mean, people are still irate 40 years afterwards that the designated
Yes.
hitter was changed. There's still people who say, "Oh, I can't," I've lost track of the number of people who say, "Oh, I can't watch baseball anymore because of this." And something changed, and baseball was this way and this was that. So football will make enormous changes, and people don't care. Baseball, the biggest change they made this year was something I've always thought is when there's a runner on first and third, pitchers have been able to fake like they're throwing to third, and then turn around and throw to first, and fake to first, which usually you can't do that, but it was just kind of a loophole in the rules. And so pitchers have been doing that for 10 years, and it really it accomplishes very little. But what it does accomplish is it always kept the runner on first a little closer to the base, because he didn't, if the pitch, it looked like the pitcher was pitching, he might do this sort of fake to third and then turn around and throw to first. So it kept one base runner closer. So it was an extremely minor technicality almost in the rules. But fans would boo because they thought it was a balk, and it wasn't a balk. But really, I always thought, I always thought that they should boo because it was a stupid rule. It made no sense. The whole point of the rule is you shouldn't be allowed to fake to a base, but if you happen to have men on first and third, you could do it through this loophole, and you could gain an advantage without throwing the ball. So you could fake and you'd fake twice and nothing would happen, and you'd gain a small advantage. You keep the runner closer, and always the fundamental principle of baseball has been there should be risk on both sides. And if
Oh,
you're able to fake to a base and not do anything and keep the runner closer, you're gaining an advantage. I mean, an
I
infinitesimal
just thought that made it more
advantage.
exciting, though.
Well, yeah,
And otherwise, I mean, I don't mean to be
and
unkind.
that
It is a
and
kind of slow game where
oh, and that would be
yeah,
I mean, if it was football, that kind of reasoning would rule the day.
I see.
If that,
Oh,
but
philosophically, there's that difference.
baseball, they look and there's all these
Huh.
fields. Well, is it fair? And in the end, they finally, I think they finally realized that, the fans are booing because this really isn't fair. You're faking both ways and you're accomplishing nothing, and yet you're gaining an advantage.
And they've decided that faking is too much of an advantage
They finally
anyhow. So,
eliminated that
but
rule.
they had
Yeah,
this one
yeah.
exception.
Well, they've eliminated the loophole, so
I
you
see.
can no longer fake to third and then turn around and throw to first or not throw to first if you want.
Hmm.
Which is usually what would happen, because usually they would fake they were going to throw to third, and they turn around to see if the runner on first
Yeah.
had taken off with the first movement, which they sometimes do,
Yeah.
and then if he had, then he'd throw to first.
Yeah.
But usually he hadn't, and usually it just
Game would
he'd
go
walk
on.
back. So you just go through this thing where there'd be a fake to third, fake to first, and then the pitcher would hold onto the ball, and the fans would all boo,
Boo.
because you'd wasted 30 seconds and accomplished
And I
nothing.
would wake up.
Well, exactly.
The other thing I'd maybe not have noticed as much because I haven't watched as much baseball this year, but the game seems to be getting geeky for stats. Weird,
As if it wasn't to begin with.
the weirdest stats. I mean, I can't.
Oh, you mean
even
by the color people and so forth, the announcers?
Yeah, I mean, well, somebody in the background is keeping these stats that are so obscure. I mean, is that relatively new? Is this a new thing in baseball, a trend, or?
Well, there's almost a war going on now between the really, really statistically minded people who tend not to be guys who play baseball. They tend to be guys who were the nerds in high school, and yet have sort of are looking at baseball from this different perspective. And then there's the jocks on the other side who say, no, here's baseball is a test of character, and the little things, and the little things matter, and all these things. So there's this real culture war going on right now, and it's
I'll
really
bet.
being fought out in front offices where there's this sort of the old school guys who look at the old stats like batting average and RBIs and say, so on. And then there are the guys who come up with these mind-numbing statistics that are very hard to understand.
They're nearly impossible to understand. I can't even explain them, and I don't even know why they bother because they're boring to tears somehow.
And
But look at what's happened with Nate Silver.
I was just going to mention, it's like Nate Silver if
Right.
he would announce a game.
Right. I mean, that's how he got his start.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
with baseball stats.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there's a lot of young people nowadays. I mean, there's the sort of OCD Asperger's kid that they just love that stuff,
Well, geek
and
stuff.
they're somewhere on that spectrum, and they really love that
Right.
stuff, and they've got access to the computers nowadays. So I mean, there's a whole new genre out there, isn't there?
Oh, there is, and
Yeah.
Nate was part of one of the cutting edge
Yeah.
guys who really, was really almost not interested in what was going on in the field. If you could see it, if you could map something mathematically and
Right.
find a different way to look at it,
Right.
and a lot of times it made more sense. I mean, the sort of Bill James sort of started that revolution,
Baseball abstract,
and
man.
it got right,
Yeah.
and it's gone through, and in many ways it really is more effective because some of the traditional baseball statistics just didn't make a lot of sense.
Oh.
Batting average has always been batting average was always sort of the fundamental. How many hits did you get out of how many at bats?
Mm-hmm.
And that's wonderful. Except that there's another important way to get on base by bases on balls. And
Oh.
the difference between if there's no runners on base, the difference between getting on base with a base on ball and getting on base with a single is absolutely none. There's no difference at all. You get on base just the same. And yet batting average just ignores bases on balls.
I see.
So one of the things that Bill James started saying was bases on balls are way underrated. And that has generally gotten into the general consciousness now. But there's still this sort of macho thing that, you should hit yourself on base. Just standing there watching four balls go by and walking down to first base.
Wussy.
It's not very, it's not very appealing, and it's not very fan friendly. I mean, who wants to watch a walk? It's not a very interesting
Right,
play.
right.
There are other plays. So there are questions. Sometimes the question is not just what's more valuable, but what makes the game entertaining. What makes it a sport? It makes it more of a sport if you swing at the pitch and the
Hit it or-
fielders
yeah.
right, and the fielders have to either try to catch it or not. If the umpire just goes ball four and the guy walks down to first base, there's no spectator value in that, and there's no athleticism in it. It's sort of, so that should always be kind of a, so on one hand, so in I think different sets of analysts are often asking different types of questions. Bill James was always asking, well, what does more to win a baseball game?
Oh,
And from his perspective, well, getting on first base by a walk is every bit as valuable as getting on base by first base
Yeah.
by a single, unless there are runners on base. And often it's just as valuable anyways. But other people were asking the question, well, that's people really aren't going to if we just teach
How good
batters
is
to
the
try to
player?
get walks all the
Yeah,
times,
yeah.
people aren't going to come watch that game very.
Right.
People are going to stay away from the stadium. It just doesn't sort of jibe with how we're taught. How do we teach our kids? Just stand there at the plate with a bat on your shoulder and don't swing at a pitch. That's a hard lesson to teach to kids. And I think baseball always is one of the key ingredients of baseball has always been. Can we reduce it to a little nugget of wisdom for our kids?
Right.
Can we say, okay, don't swing at that pitch; it's over your head. That's okay. But don't swing at any pitches because you might draw a walk. That's sort of hard to get a moral lesson out of that, and the kids
That
can
is
go
as
like,
close to cheating as you can get.
I want to play
Yeah.
soccer instead.
Yeah, it's just- what else is there to do?
I mean, it's already, in soccer I get to run, and baseball I spend a lot of time standing here. Now it's like trying to go up there and draw a walk. I mean, try to tell an 8-year-old dad and Dad, let's play soccer.
That's interesting. Now, are there any announcers like the Ernie Harwell announcing style left?
Well, Vin Scully is still,
Vince
is
Scully,
still
yeah.
alive and doing well, and he still does all the Dodger home games.
Yeah,
He doesn't
that's
go on
right.
the road anymore, but he does half their games still. And there's some really good announcers. John Miller does some great things. I mean, I think some of the national broadcasters are not as good anymore, and it's certainly taken some of the lyrical style out. But there's still some good ones.
Hmm. How does one groom for that? We have a sports journalism program, and I'm really not clear how kids make that transition into that.
Well, it takes a while. I mean, I mean Jesse here in Lansing
Yeah.
is terrific. He went to Cornell, or not to Cornell, he went to Ithaca College for sports journalism, and he's been working his way up. But it's a lot. It takes a long way to work your way up through the minor leagues
Not very many
to
slots
do
there.
that,
Either.
right?
And then the
there's-
pros when you get in them, you stay as long as you possibly can.
Oh,
A
and
lifetime.
Some of those guys
Oh,
are,
yeah.
I mean, Vince Scully's still going strong in his mid-80s, and
Whoa.
so the number of openings per year is
Yeah.
really small,
Yeah.
and so that's I think that's the hard thing is it's very hard to make your way up through the ranks.
Now, isn't Jesse's assistant this year a woman? I think
I've
an
never heard a
MSU
woman's voice
MSU
do
grad,
that.
I think.
Really?
No, I had not heard that, but
Are there any women doing that?
Uh, not baseball, not play-by-play. There's a few in other sports, and but it's a hard field to get into, and I think there's some real sexism involved. I think there men try
In our
to
culture?
say, she does just an immediate, it's she doesn't know, that there's a sense that you have to know a lot of stuff that the male announcers
Lore
don't know.
and- yeah,
Right,
yeah, I
exactly.
think so too. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a tough.
Well, before we move on too much further, because we're going to get away from one of the reasons we had you here, this weekend is the Writers' Rally,
Yeah.
and that is on Saturday, where there's about 20 sessions, and you're going to be doing a session on what are your sessions on this weekend?
I'm doing a session on Saturday afternoon on finding the book that you were meant to write.
Ah. Hmm.
Interesting title.
Yes.
So, yeah, looking forward to that, and I think and it's specifically finding the nonfiction book that you
Mhm.
want to write because I think it's a totally different process. I mean, I think writing a novel is an incredibly difficult thing, and that I know that I couldn't do, and I think that I think a lot of people, this may sound elitist, except that I'm one of the people who doesn't have the gift for it, but I really think you
Well,
have to have a gift to write a novel.
an awful lot of, I would disagree with you a little because I think an awful lot of great novelists started writing nonfiction, like yourself. I really do believe that. I mean,
Right,
that's a great training ground
Right,
because you get everything right,
right.
and you're right. And then this Friday, you're going to be doing a panel discussion at Schuler's, right, on baseball.
Yeah,
And who's joining you?
on Friday night with Tom Stanton, who's written a bunch of books about baseball, including a wonderful book about the last year at Tiger
Right?
Stadium.
He went to every game, didn't he? With
He
his
went
son?
to every home game at Tiger Stadium the last year, and just spent his time talking to people like Ernie Harwell, like Al Kaline, some of the legends, but also just talking to a lot of regular fans and fans who just showed up for one game because they wanted to be part of the final season.
Okay, now it's you and Tom
And Bill Anderson,
Bill Anderson, who is
former director of History, Arts, and Library
right,
for the state of Michigan.
who has written extensively on baseball too, and has one of the best. I've never seen it, but I guess one of the best baseball photographic collections.
His entire basement is a shrine.
He doesn't have to
It's
go
really-
far to do his research, does he?
No,
He doesn't have to go to the
no,
Baseball
no.
Hall of Fame like you. He can go into his
No,
basement.
No, he just goes to his basement.
So what do you think you three of you will be talking about?
Well, we'll be talking about baseball.
Okay.
But whatever questions come up, and it's amazing how much when we have a baseball get together and people come with their questions, it's amazing where the questions can come from.
Yeah.
They can come from out of left field, so to speak.
So to speak. What's here's one out of left field, and I saw something over the weekend in it about maybe it was about the Jackie Robinson movie. What's your favorite baseball movies?
Well, it
That's-
would have to be Bull Durham.
Bull
I
Durham.
think Bull Durham is a great American movie, and I can't say there've been too many great movies that were baseball movies, but
Whoa.
think-
Whoa.
well,
Well, I don't
what-
disagree,
what-
but I'm sure there's a lot of people would go,
okay.
whoa.
Well, what
Well,
happened?
I don't
as far as
know.
I've seen a lot of good ones, but as far as what you'd call a really great movie
Bull
that was
Durham, though.
baseball themed,
Was League of Their Own for Women good?
that was a very good movie.
Was it?
Yeah, you could call that a great movie.
Yeah.
I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah.
But I think it's a short list of great baseball movies. I would say so.
And there's a lot of
Roger
people
Ebert.
trying.
We'll check the Roger Ebert reviews and see what he...
There've been quite a few good ones, but I think great ones. I think it's a very short list.
Can I return for a moment to this idea that one of the workshops is going to be, how do you discover which book you were meant to write?
Yeah, I think partly it's a line, but I think once you have that desire, then I think it's a lot easier to get there. When you've identified a nonfiction subject
Yeah.
that you want to write, then I think you got to ask some important questions like, how much of my life is it going to take to write this? And
Very good question.
how much money am I going to make for this? And is it going to be worth it? Because in most cases, the answer is not very much money.
Well, if you're looking to do it to get rich, you're probably
Right.
in it for the wrong reason.
Right.
So it's a passion. So
Well, I think
you
there
help
has to be a
identify what your
passion.
passions are.
Right. I think there has to be a passion. I think it has to be, have other people written the book you've written before? Because sometimes, because people say, I'm going to write another biography of somebody who's, I'm going to
Right.
write the new biography of Abraham Lincoln. Well, you're going to have a hard time finding a real good angle there.
If you're not Doris
that
Kearns
hasn't
Goodwin.
been taken. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not, that's probably, but if the book that you're thinking about writing, if it hasn't been written, then that's a good cue that maybe you're the person to write it.
The reason it struck with me is because I realized that Chris Hedges has written 2 books that I wanted to write, and he saved me the trouble, is the way I look at it. And he did a better job than I could have, so that's even better. And that does happen.
Mhm.
I mean, you're burning to write something, and then you read something by somebody else, and you say, that really says what I wanted to say.
And I think that's a great question to start out with.
Yeah.
And I know with my first book, I sort of thought, well, as somebody about history of baseball in Michigan in the 1860s, and I thought, well, not only did I think, I really for a long time I wanted to read that, but not only did I say nobody has written this, I said, the only way that somebody would be working on it right now if they were sitting at the microfilm, a reader right next to me at the Library of Michigan, turning the same newspapers that I'm turning with. So I knew that not only had nobody written the book, but nobody was working on the book.
Nobody was going to.
Because
No.
they'd be sitting right next to me.
That
if
was
they
the
were.
only source for the
That
material.
was the only way to get those old newspapers. I mean, that's the only source that's there, and they're all at the Library of Michigan.
That's how I did my first book. I was hired by Marsh's son and E.O. Marsh's son to write a biography of his dad,
Hmm.
and I had to sit at the microfilm machine. And
Right.
that's a Bill spent his done time at that.
Oh, I spent so much time the last 2 years at it, but I enjoy it. Now
Yeah.
I'm easily distracted. I have to admit that.
It is
The-
like the internet. It does.
yeah.
You do find
The
yourself.
article I just did on the hockey player from Sault Ste. Marie, I spent probably 100 hours in microfiche for an article that is 5,000 words.
I know. Oh, it's fun though. That's the kind of research that once you get the bug for it, it's sort of like Wikipedia. In the old-fashioned Wikipedia, you could find your way from one to the other. That's how I learned all about the Fatty Arbuckle murder case,
Oh,
and
yeah.
ended up doing a book that included half of that information. It wasn't the book I had intended to do, but I was so fascinated by those early accounts. So sometimes you learn a whole bunch of things on the way you hadn't expected.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, sometimes nowadays having something as handy as Wikipedia really kind of ruins the fun, because you can get the answer too quickly, and I think sometimes taking a
Ah,
long time to get to the answer sort of gives you a sense, gives you a way, to figure out what's really interesting to you, not just the
oh,
answer, but what part of the process
what
is
part of the process?
interesting to you.
Oh,
And I sometimes think, when there's so much handy with the internet, to get to the answer quickly, that I think that destroys part of the process that's essential
the
to writing a
challenge.
book. Yeah,
Yeah.
the kind of the formulating question, and then asking, okay, what part of this question is really interesting? If I
I
can
need
only
to.
find part of the answer.
I need to thank Peter Morris for coming in, and I'm going to get you more often than just when baseball season is on. And tune in next Monday night to Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie and Bill. This is WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I was looking up Empire of Illusion. That's the Chris Hedges book that I was reading.
Oh,
Peter, you're right about the Wikipedia stuff. If people only use Wikipedia,
okay.
well, I like it for some things, but
I use it,
but when you go to a library and you start going through those microfiches, you see story angles you could not ever find them. I mean, plus the flavor of an era.